some of their influence. I mean, I think part of what that means is that people are more and more getting their information. I mean, there's part of why things are polarizing is that there are more and more people who get their information from really partisan sources. So they get their emails from the Democrat or Republican Party or a progressive or conservative foundation, and they get their, they read blogs written by the same people, and there's, that being said, I mean, anytime we do a protest, we take a video of it and we post it up on our website, and we email it to our friends, and we, it's, because I think that that's part of how, I mean, because again, part of, I mean, who's your audience? I mean, is it really, I don't think, part of, the funny thing about basing everything you do on getting the media to pay attention is that we forget that people don't actually care too much about what they see on TV. And so, I mean, they see lots of things on TV that doesn't necessarily stick. And so, really, the audience is the person you're targeting, first off. And you want to do it in a way that you make sure that they remember that it happened. And then you also want to do it in a way that the people the networks that you already have, that all of those people say it happened and it looked fun and I want to go to the next one. Does that make sense? I mean, does that, and I think that's, so actually I think, to be honest, I feel like better about the situation relative to the media now than I did a few years ago, because it seems like we've got more options for, and I don't know that I care about, everybody in the state knowing what we're doing, but I do want the people who I do want everybody who we work with to know about it, and I'd like to have more people, and I'd like them to feel good about it and share it with their friends so that we're working with more people.
Unbeknownst to me, we're being filmed, and we are going to have this kind of discussion put up on YouTube. And I didn't do anything to make it happen, just to let you know. Glenda?
I had a question, or it relates back to Bill's comment that we're making assumptions about the dominant religious culture here, that they're not caring, or that they, their human nature is fundamentally different. I would surely think that part of this comes back to the ability to feel compassion and empathy and to enact on that. And given that, I agree with the premise that Mormons are just as caring as other people. Maybe that's an assumption. But given that, do you actually, there's a real difference. I think politically, it's difficult to be a conservative and be compassionate. I hate to say that, but given that, do you actually see a possibility that the political structure in Utah will change, and that the dominant, cruel political outlook will actually soften over time, and that will become more of a balanced culture?
Can I respond to that? As long as, for example, without identifying their religious affiliation, the Utah legislature thinks that a concern with ethics involves managing their external relationships between themselves and lobbyists is what ethics amounts to, and they forget that the practice of ethics has to be part of their legislative deliberations, like in the case of justice, for example, then no.
I would like to address that. Since I was a member of the dominant religion for 45 years, I have seen a significant change. I think there has been, certainly amongst the generation of my children, from 20 to 38, a huge shift. Far more what I would call compassionate, forward-thinking, much less conservative, much less prone to the absolute obedience to authority, which I think has characterized the Utah political culture for a long time. So I have hope.
I've seen a lot of my LDS students who go on missions over the past 30 years. It's been very different in the last 10 years than it was in the first 10 I was here.
Exactly.
Well, I think, for me, I think that the definition, I think that Utah is probably going to remain a conservative state for a long time, but I think that the definition of conservative can change. I mean, when Lyndon Johnson was proposing creating Medicare and Medicaid in 1965, Ronald Reagan was saying it was socialism and it was going to lead to tyranny where everyone was a slave to the government. And, now there's not a politician who, no matter how conservative, who says we should get rid of Medicare. There's some who have qualms about Medicaid, but the definition moves. And so I think it's absolutely possible that in our country, conservatives will hit the point where they realize, well, it's at least important that every American has their basic human needs, human rights met. Whether or not that, what that'll mean. Does that mean that we'll be a perfect society? No, but I think that that's part of what happens is that things that seem really difficult now can move, and I don't, and so does that mean, I guess it all depends. And there has been. There's been a visible, I've been here for 20 years, and we are still a very conservative state, but what it means to be that conservative is a very different thing than what it meant 20 years ago.
Thank you.
One of the things that I would like to ask you guys and Bill or the other two panelists here is the context. All this, what we're talking about always happens in the context, and the context could be a media context, or it could be the wider social context. And I'd like to, Bill, ask you kind of to talk about that a little bit in terms of your Sarah Palin stuff. It's obvious you're doing this. It's a specific tactic to promote a strategy to reach some goal. Now, talk a little bit about some of the other things, some of the other specific tactics to get to your goal, which I'm assuming is to tap the oil and gas industry for a little more money, like they're doing in Alaska, and how holding up a mask in front of the governor's office and talking about it would be more effective than, say, getting a group of Republican legislators and a group of Democratic legislators and going into the governor's office and say, this is our concern, and this is how we want your help. And in terms of something that if I were approached like that, I would be offended. That would tell me that you're approaching this conversation in a way it's more stagecraft than approaching it in some way to solve a serious problem.
Well, I think that if I were a lobbyist for the oil industry, that's exactly the strategy I would use, because I would have donated to all of those Republican and Democrats' campaign funds, and I could get the group of them to go with me and challenge the governor on this specific issue. That's there are legislators who we've talked to. From my perspective, we live in a state where a large amount of structural violence is taken for granted. There's this consensus. Last session, millions of dollars were cut for programs for people with disabilities, and everybody, Republicans and Democrats, were patting each other on the back at the end of the session saying, well, we made some tough decisions, but we did the best we could. There is this idea that that a certain amount of structural violence is inevitable, and the people I work with are the ones who are the victims of that structural violence, and